Six black SUVs surrounded Evan Cole's rundown apartment building like predators closing in on wounded prey. Just 24 hours ago, he was nobody, a janitor, a single dad barely scraping by. Then a bullet tore through his shoulder as he shielded a billionaire's son from a gunman's rage. Now the world wanted answers. Was he a hero or a con artist playing the long game? "You're safe, kid," he'd whispered through the pain, not knowing those three words would either destroy or transform everything he'd built. Welcome to a story where sacrifice meets suspicion, where forgotten legacies resurface, and where one man's split-second decision exposes truths buried for decades. Stick with me until the end and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. The September rain came down in sheets that Tuesday night, turning the parking lot behind the Regal Cinema into a mirror of broken light. Evan Cole pulled his threadbare jacket tighter around his shoulders, his work boots splashing through puddles as he guided his 8-year-old daughter Mia toward their beat-up Honda Civic. The movie, some animated thing about talking dogs that Mia had been begging to see for weeks, had cost him nearly a day's wages, but the joy on her face made every penny worth it. "Dad, did you see when the puppy learned to fly?" Mia bounced beside him, her worn sneakers squeaking against the wet asphalt. That was the best part. Well, except for when he saved his friend. That was pretty cool, too. Evan smiled, exhaustion pulling at the corners of his eyes. He'd worked a double shift at Morrison Industries before picking Mia up from after-school care, but her enthusiasm was infectious. "Yeah, sweetheart. That puppy was pretty brave, wasn't he, Biawa? The bravest," Mia declared, spreading her arms wide like wings. "Just like you when you fixed Mrs. Chen's ceiling last week. She said you were her hero." "Mrs. Chen exaggerates," Evan chuckled, fishing his keys from his pocket. The parking lot was nearly empty now, most families having cleared out after the earlier showing. Only a handful of cars remained their windows, fogged with condensation. 20 feet away, another pair moved through the rain, with decidedly more grace. Laura Sterling's Louboutin heels clicked precisely on the pavement, despite the water her designer trench coat repelling droplets like it had been engineered for the task, which at $3,000 it probably had. Her 7-year-old son Ethan walked beside her, sheltered under a golf umbrella that probably cost more than Evan's monthly rent. "Mother, the scientific inaccuracies in that film were astounding," Ethan said, his voice carrying the clipped precision of private tutors and prep schools. "Dogs lack the bone density required for flight, and the aerodynamics were completely— Sometimes, darling, we watch movies for fun, not for scientific accuracy." Laura interrupted gently, though her eyes were already on her phone scrolling through what looked like stock reports even in the dim light. Evan had seen Laura Sterling before who hadn't. Her face graced magazine covers and business journals. She'd built her tech empire from nothing, or so the stories went. Now she was worth billions, lived in a mansion that overlooked the city, and apparently occasionally took her son to regular movie theaters, like some sort of social experiment. He deliberately looked away, focusing on getting Mia to the car. People like Laura Sterling existed in a different universe, one where problems were solved with wire transfers and lawyers, not duct tape and overtime. "Dad, I'm cold," Mia said, shivering despite her hand-me-down jacket. "Almost there, baby girl. I'll get the heat going as soon as—" The first shot cracked through the rain like thunder, but sharper, meaner. For a split second, nobody moved. The sound was so out of place in the mundane parking lot that Evan's brain struggled to process it. Then the second shot came, and the windshield of a nearby BMW exploded in a shower of safety glass. "Get down!" The voice that roared from Evan's throat didn't sound like his own. Pure instinct took over. He grabbed Mia, practically throwing her behind the nearest car, a white SUV with rental plates. His work boots slipped on the wet asphalt as he spun around searching for the source of the shots. That's when he saw him. A figure in a black hoodie, maybe 30 feet away, arm-extended gun gleaming under the parking lot's sodium lights. The gunman wasn't looking at Evan or Mia. His focus was laser-sharp on Laura Sterling and her son. Laura stood frozen, her phone clattering to the ground, her face a mask of shock. Ethan. Brilliant, little Ethan, who could probably solve calculus problems, just stared at the gun with the incomprehension of a child who'd never imagined violence outside of video games. Time dilated. Evan could see everything with crystalline clarity. The raindrops suspended in the air, the gunman's finger tightening on the trigger. Laura's hands starting to move toward her son, but too slowly. Much too slowly. The third shot rang out. Evan's body moved without consulting his brain. 32 years of life. 32 years of playing it safe, keeping his head down, avoiding trouble, evaporated in an instant. His legs pumped, covering the distance in 3 strides. He slammed into Ethan just as the bullet arrived, wrapping the boy in his arms and spinning him away. Fire bloomed in Evan's shoulder. He'd been punched before bar fights in his younger, stupider days, but this was different. This was like someone had driven a white-hot railroad spike through his body. He heard himself gasp, tasted copper in his mouth. Felt his legs turn to jelly. "You're safe, kid," he managed to whisper to Ethan, who was staring up at him with eyes wide as dinner plates. "You're safe." The parking lot tilted. Evan's knees hit the asphalt hard, sending another spike of pain through his body. He could hear screaming multiple voices now. Mia calling for him. Laura Sterling shouting orders at someone. Sirens in the distance growing closer. The gunman was running. Even through his dimming vision, Evan could see the figure sprinting toward the tree line at the edge of the parking lot. Then more shots, different guns, multiple sources. Security. Of course, someone like Laura Sterling had security. "Oh God! Oh God!" Laura was suddenly there, her hands pressing against Evan's shoulder. Her $3,000 coat was off, wadded up, being pressed against the wound. "Stay with me. Look at me. What's your name?" "Evan," he managed, though his tongue felt thick. "My daughter, Mia. She's safe. My security has her. She's safe." Laura's voice had the commanding tone of someone used to being obeyed, but underneath it, Evan could hear something else. Fear. Maybe even guilt. "You saved my son. Do you understand? You saved Ethan." Evan tried to nod, but the parking lot was spinning now, the lights smearing into streaks. He could hear Mia crying, wanted to tell her it was okay, that Daddy was fine, but the words wouldn't come. What's his blood type? Someone new was talking, paramedic probably. When had the ambulance arrived? How would I know that? Laura's voice frustrated. Dad has O negative. Mia's voice cut through everything else. He gives blood every month at the church. He says it's important because O negative can help anybody. Of course she knew. His brilliant, beautiful daughter who memorized everything, who paid attention when he thought she wasn't listening. "Smart girl," the paramedic said. "Okay, we're moving him now. On 3. The world exploded in pain as they lifted him. Evan might have screamed, he wasn't sure. Everything was fragmenting, breaking apart like a movie film burning in the projector. The last thing he saw before the darkness claimed him was Ethan Sterling's face, the boy's expression a mixture of terror and awe. Rain and tears streaming down his cheeks. The kid was holding something, a blue scarf, expensive looking, probably cashmere. He was pressing it against Evan's wound alongside his mother's coat, his small hands shaking but determined. "You're going to be okay," Ethan said, and for a moment he didn't sound like a precocious 7-year-old at all. He sounded like someone who understood the weight of a promise. "You have to be okay." Then the ambulance doors slammed shut, and Evan's world compressed to the rhythm of sirens and the steady voice of the paramedic calling out his vital signs. He woke up in stages, like swimming up from the bottom of a deep pool. First came the sounds, the steady beep of monitors, the hiss of oxygen, the distant murmur of voices. Then the smells, antiseptic floor wax, that particular combination that screamed hospital to anyone who'd ever spent time in one. The pain came last, a dull throb in his shoulder that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Not as bad as he'd expected, which meant drugs. Good drugs from the foggy feeling in his head. "Dad," Evan forced his eyes open. Mia was there curled up in an uncomfortable-looking chair beside his bed, still wearing the same clothes from the movie theater. How long had he been out? "Hey, baby girl," he croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. Mia's face crumpled with relief. She launched herself at him, then caught herself at the last second, settling for gripping his good hand with both of hers. "You scared me so bad. The doctors said you were going to be okay, but you wouldn't wake up, and I didn't know what to do, and shh, it's okay. I'm okay." Evan squeezed her hands, trying to assess the damage. His left shoulder was wrapped in enough bandages to supply a small army. Various tubes and wires connected him to the battalion of machines surrounding his bed. "How long was I out?" 14 hours, a new voice said from the doorway. Laura Sterling stood there looking nothing like the polished CEO from the magazine covers. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her makeup long gone, and she was wearing what looked like yesterday's clothes. Beside her stood Ethan, clutching that same blue scarf from the parking lot. "Ms. Sterling," Evan said immediately, trying to sit up straighter and immediately regretting it as pain shot through his shoulder. "Please don't." She moved into the room with quick steps. "And it's Laura. I think after what you did, we can dispense with formalities." Anyone would have... "No," Laura interrupted, her voice sharp. "They wouldn't have. My security team was 20 seconds away." 20 seconds. You had maybe 2 seconds to make a decision, and you chose to save a child you'd never met before. You chose to take a bullet for my son. Ethan stepped forward, still clutching the scarf. Up close, Evan could see it was indeed cashmere, probably worth more than everything in Evan's closet combined. There were bloodstains on it now, Evan's blood. "The trajectory," Ethan said in his too serious voice, "would have been center mass for me. Fatal with 93% probability given the distance and caliber. You altered the path by 47 degrees. The bullet entered your shoulder, instead missing major arteries by 2 centimeters. "Ethan's been doing the math," Laura said softly. "It's how he processes trauma. He's calculated every angle, every possibility. In none of them do things end well without your intervention." Evan looked at the boy, saw the shadows under his eyes, the way his small hands white-knuckled the scarf. "You doing okay, kid?" Ethan nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. "I don't understand why you did it. We're strangers. From a cost-benefit analysis perspective, it makes no sense." "Ethan," Laura said warningly, but Evan raised his good hand. "It's okay." He looked at the boy, then at Mia, who was watching everything with her 2 wise eyes. "You want to know the truth? I didn't think about it. I saw a kid in danger and my body just moved. But if I had thought about it, if I'd had time to do your cost-benefit thing, I still would have done it." "Why?" Ethan whispered. "Because that's what people do. Real people, anyway. We look out for each other. We protect kids even when they're not ours, even when it costs us." Evan glanced at Laura. "Your mom would have done the same thing if she'd been closer. I just had the angle." "The angle?" Ethan repeated like he was filing it away for future analysis. "Mr. Cole," Laura began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since she'd walked in. "I need you to know that all your medical expenses will be covered. Everything. And I've arranged for—" "That's not necessary," Evan said quickly. "I didn't do it for money." "I know that." Laura's voice was fierce. "Everyone knows that. But you have a daughter to think about. Let me help, please. It's the least I can do." Before Evan could respond, the door burst open again. This time it wasn't medical staff or visitors. It was chaos incarnate in the form of 3 people with cameras and recording equipment. "Mr. Cole, Jerry Matkins, Channel 7 News. How does it feel to be a hero? Did you know who you were saving? Is it true you're a janitor at Morrison Industries?" The questions came rapid-fire, overlapping, aggressive. Mia shrank back against Evan's bed. Ethan actually stepped behind his mother. Laura's expression went from grateful to glacial in about half a second. "Security!" she barked, and 2 large men in suits materialized as if from thin air. "Get them out, now!" "The public has a right to know," one of the reporters started. "The public has a right to exactly nothing regarding this man's private medical information," Laura snapped. "You're trespassing. Leave or I'll have you arrested." The security team didn't wait for the reporters to desk. They efficiently herded them out despite protests and threats about First Amendment rights. Laura turned back to Evan, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry. I don't know how they found out you were awake. Someone on staff must have called for a quick payday," Evan finished. He'd been around long enough to know how these things worked. "It's fine. Not your fault." "It is actually." Laura pulled out her phone, already typing. "This happened because of me. The shooter..." She stopped, glancing at the children. Mia, why don't you and Ethan go find the vending machines? Evan suggested, fishing in his wallet with his good hand. Get yourself something. Ethan, too. But Dad, it's okay, sweetheart, just down the hall and back. Mia took the money reluctantly. Come on, she said to Ethan, who looked equally reluctant to leave. They have those honey buns you probably never had before. They're basically diabetes in plastic wrap, but they're really good. When the kids were gone, Laura sank into the chair Mia had vacated. For a moment, her CEO mask slipped entirely, and she just looked tired, scared, human. The shooter was Marcus Webb, she said quietly. Former employee. I had to fire him 6 months ago. He'd been stealing proprietary code, selling it to competitors. I could have just let him go quietly, but I pressed charges, made an example of him. The prosecutor said he'd do 5 to 7 years, but he made bail and he came after you. After Ethan, Laura corrected. He came after my son, to hurt me in the worst way possible. Her hands clenched in her lap. Security footage shows he'd been following us for 3 days, waiting for an opportunity. I gave him one by insisting on taking Ethan to a normal theater, trying to give him a normal experience. Don't, Evan said firmly. Don't blame yourself for trying to be a good mom. Laura laughed, but it was bitter. A good mom would have better security. A good mom wouldn't have enemies willing to shoot at her child. A good mom takes her kid to movies even when she's busy running a billion-dollar company, Evan countered. Trust me, I know what bad parenting looks like. What you're doing, isn't it? They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the room, Evan could hear the normal hospital sounds, codes being called, phones ringing, the squeak of gurneys. Normal life continuing while his had been completely upended. The media is going to be relentless, Laura said finally. Your name, your picture, your entire history. It's all going to be public by tomorrow morning. They'll dig into everything. Every parking ticket, every late payment, every moment of your life will be scrutinized. Evan thought about his modest apartment, his ancient car, his work locker at Morrison Industries where he kept his janitor's uniform. Not much to find. I'm pretty boring. That won't stop them from trying to make it interesting. They'll spin stories, create narratives. Hero or opportunist, they'll make you into whatever sells more papers. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to protect you, but I can only do so much. My lawyers can threaten, my PR team can try to control the narrative, but at the end of the day, she shrugged helplessly. You saved my son. The media smells blood in the water. As if to underscore her point, Evan's phone charging on the bedside table began buzzing incessantly. Text after text, call after call. He reached for it with his good hand, saw dozens of unknown numbers, messages from reporters, requests for interviews. How did they get my number? Someone always talks, Laura said grimly. A coworker, a neighbor, someone who knows someone. By tonight, they'll have interviewed everyone you've ever met. The thought made Evan's stomach turn. Not for himself, but for Mia. She didn't deserve this. She was just a kid who'd wanted to see a movie about flying dogs. I can put you up in a hotel, Laura offered. Somewhere secure with guards, until this dies down. I have work, Evan said automatically. I can't just... You have a hole in your shoulder, Laura pointed out. You're not going to be mopping floors anytime soon. She was right, of course. Morrison Industries wasn't exactly generous with their sick leave for janitors. A few days, maybe a week, and then they'd replace him. 9 years of perfect attendance meant nothing when you couldn't push a mop. Let me help, Laura said again. Please, I have resources you're going to need. Before Evan could respond, Mia and Ethan returned. Mia was chattering away about something, her hands moving animatedly, while Ethan listened with the intense focus of someone trying to decode an alien language. And that's why you should never microwave a honey bun with the wrapper still on, Mia concluded. Trust me, I learned the hard way. Fascinating, Ethan said, and he seemed to mean it. The metallization in the wrapper would create electrical arcing, potentially damaging the magnetron. Yeah, that. Also, it catches fire and your dad grounds you for a week, Mia added cheerfully. She looked between the adults. Why do you both look so serious? Just grown-up stuff, Evan said, forcing a smile. Nothing to worry about. But even as he said it, he could see the crowd gathering outside his hospital window. News vans were pulling up their satellite dishes already extending. Someone had set up a banner that read, "Hero of Regal Cinema." This was just the beginning. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of police interviews, medical checks, and increasingly creative attempts by reporters to get into the room. One dressed as a nurse, another as a food service worker. Security caught them all, but it was exhausting. Detective Sarah Kim, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression, took Evan's statement 3 times each time, probing for inconsistencies that didn't exist. "You'd never met Ms. Sterling before that night. Seen her on magazine covers, that's it. Never applied for a job at her company. I'm a janitor detective. They require degrees I don't have. No connection at all. Our kids apparently like the same movie about flying dogs. That's the extent of it." She finally seemed satisfied, closing her notebook with a snap. "You're either the luckiest or unluckiest man in the city, Mr. Cole. Jury's still out on which." Dr. Martinez, his attending physician, was more optimistic. "The bullet went through clean, missed everything vital. You'll need physical therapy, and that shoulder's going to ache when it rains for the rest of your life, but you'll have full use of the arm." "How long until I can work?" "Depends on the work. Desk job, maybe 3 weeks. Physical labor." He shrugged. 6 weeks minimum, maybe 8. 8 weeks without pay. Evan did the math in his head and didn't like the answer. He had maybe 2 weeks of expenses saved if he stretched it. Laura had left to deal with her company. Apparently the attempted shooting of her son had sent stock prices into a nosedive, but she'd left behind a business card with a personal cell number written on the back. "Call me for anything," she'd said. "I mean it." Evan fingered the card premium stock with raised lettering. It probably cost more to print than he made in an hour. Mia had finally fallen asleep in the chair, her head at an uncomfortable angle that would leave her with a sore neck. Evan watched her sleep, this little person who was his whole world, and wondered what he'd dragged her into. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his landlord, Mr. Petrov. "Evan, is true what I see on news? You are hero." "I'm not a hero. Mr. Petrov, just wrong place, wrong time." No, you are hero. My wife, she is crying watching the news, says you are good man, best tenant. Listen, the rent this month, forget about it, is paid." "Mr. Petrov, I can't, is done. You save child, I forget 1 month rent is nothing." There was a pause. "But Evan, reporters there here, many reporters. They want to know about you, ask questions. I tell them nothing but others in building." He trailed off meaningfully. "Others in the building would talk." Of course they would. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B, who'd always resented that Mia was friends with her daughter. Tommy from 2A, who Evan had reported for dealing drugs near the playground. They'd all have stories to tell, axes to grind. "Thanks for the heads up, Mr. Petrov. You need place to stay, my brother has cabin. Is not much, but is quiet. Private. I'll think about it. Thanks." After Petrov hung up, Evan stared at his phone. 47 missed calls. Over 100 texts. His social media dormant for years had thousands of notifications. How did people even find these accounts? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He expected another reporter, but instead a small elderly woman entered, leaning heavily on a walker. "Mr. Cole?" Her voice was whispered, uncertain. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Eleanor Webb." Webb. The shooter's name was Webb. Evan tensed his good hand, moving instinctively toward the call button, but the woman raised a shaking hand. "Please, I'm Marcus's mother. I needed to see you." She was crying, Evan realized, silent tears streaming down lined cheeks. "Mrs. Webb, I don't think—" "He was a good boy once," she interrupted. "Before the anger, before the drugs, before all of it, he was a good boy who loved soccer and astronomy and—" She stopped, composing herself. "I'm not making excuses. What he did was unforgivable, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry. So very sorry." Evan didn't know what to say. "What did you say to the mother of someone who'd tried to kill a child?" "He called me," she continued, "after. He called me and said he'd done something terrible. Said he'd tried to hurt a little boy because he wanted that woman to suffer like he was suffering. He's sick, Mr. Cole. Sick in his mind and sick in his soul, and I couldn't help him." "Mrs. Webb." You saved that child, she said firmly. But you also saved my son from becoming a child killer. He would have never come back from that. Never. So thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice. She turned to leave, then paused. The media, they'll try to make him into a monster. Maybe he is one. But monsters aren't born, Mr. Cole. They're made. Sometimes by their own choices, sometimes by things beyond anyone's control. Remember that when they come asking questions. She shuffled out, leaving Evan to process what had just happened. The mother of the man who'd shot him had come to thank him. The world had officially gone insane. By evening, the hospital had to establish a perimeter. The crowd outside had grown to hundreds, some supporters with signs calling him a hero. Others, how were there others, claiming it was all a publicity stunt. Police barriers went up. Security guards were posted. Evan watched it all from his window, Mia sleeping fitfully beside him. She'd refused to leave, and the nurses had taken pity bringing in a cot for her. But even in sleep, she looked troubled, her face creased with worry. Quite a circus. Evan turned to find a man in an expensive suit standing in his doorway. Not a reporter, he had the kind of presence that suggested lawyer or worse, politician. I'm James Harrison, Ms. Sterling's head of security. He entered without invitation, his eyes scanning the room with professional assessment. I failed in my job last night. You did it for me. You weren't there. I should have been. That's the point. Harrison moved to the window, studying the crowd below. We've identified 3 credible threats against you in the last 6 hours. Threats against me, why? Because Marcus Webb has friends? Because some people think you're a fraud looking for a payout? Because the internet is a cesspool where anonymous cowards make threats for fun? He turned from the window. Ms. Sterling wants to move you and your daughter to a secure location. I haven't agreed to that. You haven't seen the threats. Harrison pulled out his phone, showed Evan a screenshot. The words made his blood run cold. They weren't threatening him, they were threatening Mia. Detailed, specific threats about what they'd do to a little girl whose father dared to play hero. Jesus, Evan breathed. These people probably won't do anything. 99% of online threats are just keyboard warriors venting. But that 1%, Harrison pocketed his phone. Can you afford to take that chance? Evan looked at Mia, still sleeping, still innocent of how ugly the world had become overnight. Where would we go? Ms. Sterling has a property in Westchester. Gated community, private security, excellent schools. I can't afford... You're not being asked to pay rent, Mr. Cole. You're being asked to keep your daughter safe while this situation resolves. The situation. Like it was a business problem to be managed, not a fundamental upheaval of their entire life. I need to think about it. Harrison placed a card on the bedside table. My direct line. When you're ready, and you will be ready, once you see tomorrow's news coverage, call me. He left as suddenly as he'd arrived. Evan picked up the card, plain white with just a phone number. No name, no title. The kind of card people carried when they did things that couldn't be publicized. The sun was setting, painting the hospital room in shades of orange and red. Somewhere out there, Marcus Webb was in custody, probably being interrogated. Laura Sterling was managing a corporate crisis. Ethan was trying to process trauma through mathematics. And Evan Cole, janitor, single father, nobody special, was lying in a hospital bed with a hole in his shoulder and his entire life splashed across the news. Mia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Dad, right here, baby girl. Are we going to be okay? It was such a simple question with such a complicated answer. They were alive, that was something. But okay. Evan wasn't sure they'd ever be okay in the same way again. Yeah, he lied, pulling her close with his good arm. We're going to be fine. Outside, someone had started chanting his name. Others joined in. Evan, Evan, Evan. Like he was some kind of sports hero instead of a janitor who'd just reacted without thinking. His phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number. This one just had 2 words, thank you. He was about to delete it when he noticed the sender had included a photo. It was Ethan Sterling asleep in what looked like a massive bed, still clutching that blue scarf. The kid looked peaceful for the first time since Evan had seen him. Maybe that made it worth it. Maybe saving one kid's life, giving him the chance to sleep peacefully again, was worth whatever came next. The chanting outside grew louder. News helicopters circled overhead. The circus, as Harrison had called it, was just getting started. Evan closed his eyes and tried to remember what life had been like just 24 hours ago. Simple, predictable, safe. That life was gone now, blown apart, as surely as if that bullet had found its mark. In its place was something new, something uncertain, something that would either destroy them or forge them into something stronger. Time would tell which. But as Mia curled against his good side, her breathing evening out into sleep, Evan made himself a promise. Whatever came next, whatever the media said, whatever threats emerged from the shadows, he would protect his daughter. He would keep her safe. Even if it meant accepting help from a billionaire, even if it meant leaving everything they knew behind, even if it meant becoming someone he never wanted to be, a public figure, a symbol, a hero. The word sat uneasily in his mind. Heroes were people who chose to run toward danger. He'd just been a father who saw a kid in trouble. The fact that the kid happened to be worth billions didn't change the fundamental equation. Or did it? The hospital room grew dark as evening became night. Outside, the crowd showed no signs of dispersing. If anything, it was growing, fed by social media and the 24-hour news cycle's insatiable hunger for content. Somewhere in the city, morning editions were being printed with his face on the front page. Hero janitor saves billionaire's son. He could already imagine the headlines. By morning, everyone would know his name. By morning, everything would change. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he had his daughter safe beside him. Tonight, he was alive when he probably shouldn't be. Tonight, a 7-year-old boy was sleeping peacefully because Evan Cole, nobody special, had made a split-second decision to be something more. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The morning came too soon, bringing with it a reality Evan hadn't fully prepared for. He woke to find Mia already awake, standing by the window, her small frame silhouetted against the pale dawn light. The crowd below had thinned, but hadn't disappeared entirely. Die-hard supporters with their homemade signs had apparently camped out overnight. "They're still here," Mia said quietly, not turning around. "That lady with the pink hair, she's been holding that sign since yesterday. It says Evan Cole is a real-life superhero. But you're not, are you? You're just my dad." The innocence in her voice, tinged with confusion, broke something in Evan's chest. He struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his shoulder. "Come here, sweetheart." She padded over, crawling carefully onto the bed beside him. Up close, he could see she'd been crying. Her eyes were puffy, the pillowcase stained with dried tears. "I'm scared, Dad," she admitted in a whisper. "Everything's different now. Everyone's looking at us. At school, they're going to ask questions, and I don't know what to say." Before Evan could respond, his phone erupted with notifications. The morning news cycle had begun. Against his better judgment, he opened one of the news apps. His own face stared back at him, a driver's license photo from years ago when he'd been younger, less worn down by life. The headline read, "From Zero to Hero, the minimum wage worker who saved a billionaire's son." The article was worse than he'd imagined. They'd found everything. His bankruptcy filing from 5 years ago when Mia's mother had left them with medical debt. His work history, a string of manual labor jobs that painted a picture of someone going nowhere fast. They'd even interviewed his high school guidance counselor who remembered him as unremarkable but pleasant. Mr. Cole displayed no particular ambition or exceptional qualities during his time at Jefferson High, the counselor was quoted as saying. "It's surprising to see him in this situation." Surprising. Like saving a child's life was somehow out of character for someone who mopped floors for a living. Another article took a different angle. Questions arise about hero janitor's motives. This one quoted anonymous sources suggesting Evan had recognized Laura Sterling and saw an opportunity. They'd calculated how much similar heroes had received in rewards and settlements, implying he'd done the math in those split seconds before jumping in front of a bullet. "Dad, you're squeezing too hard," Mia said, and he realized he'd pulled her tight against his side, his good arm protective around her. "Sorry, baby." He loosened his grip but didn't let go. "We're going to get through this, okay, all of it." A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Martinez entered, followed by someone Evan didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything in seconds. "Mr. Cole, this is Dr. Patricia Huang," Dr. Martinez said. She's our chief psychiatrist, hospital protocol for traumatic incidents. I don't need a psychiatrist, Evan said automatically. Dr. Huang smiled a practiced expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. It's standard procedure. A few questions, nothing invasive. Your daughter can stay if you'd prefer. She went through a checklist of questions about his mental state, his sleep, his appetite. Evan answered, mechanically aware that Mia was listening to every word. When she asked about previous trauma, he kept his answers vague. No need for Mia to hear about the darker parts of his past, the father who'd left when he was 10, the mother who'd drunk herself to death by the time he was 18. Have you experienced any feelings of regret about your actions? Dr. Huang asked. Regret? Evan looked at her incredulously. For saving a kid's life. Some people experience what we call hero's remorse, she explained. The consequences of their actions, the media attention, the disruption to their lives, can cause them to wish they'd acted differently. Evan thought about the threats Harrison had shown him, the articles painting him as either a saint or an opportunist, the crowd outside that showed no signs of going away. No, he said firmly. No regret. Dr. Huang made a note. And how do you feel about the shooter? I try not to think about him. But when you do? Evan was quiet for a moment. His mother came to see me yesterday, said he was a good kid once. I guess I feel sorry for her. For him too, maybe. Angry, but sorry. That's a very evolved perspective, Mr. Cole. It's a practical one. Hating him doesn't fix my shoulder or make any of this go away. After a few more questions, Dr. Huang declared him mentally sound and left. Dr. Martinez checked his bandages, adjusted his medication, and mentioned something about discharge papers for tomorrow. Tomorrow. Evan would have to leave the relative safety of the hospital and face whatever waited outside. The thought made his stomach clench. His phone rang. The number was blocked, but he answered anyway. It could be Harrison or someone from Laura's team. Evan Cole? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Who's this? My name is Richard Blackwood. I'm a producer with Nightline News. We'd like to offer you an exclusive interview. Tell your side of the story. Not interested. We're prepared to offer $50,000 for an exclusive. Evan nearly dropped the phone. $50,000 would cover their expenses for over a year. It would mean security stability, maybe even a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. I said I'm not interested. $75,000. That's our final offer. My answer's the same at any price. There was a pause. You know, Mr. Cole, the story's going to be told with or without your input. Don't you want to control the narrative? Goodbye, Mr. Blackwood. He hung up, but the phone immediately rang again. Different number, same pitch, then another and another. By the fifth call, he turned the phone off entirely. Why didn't you take the monies? Mia asked. $75,000 is a lot, right? It is, Evan agreed. But some things shouldn't be for sale. What happened that night, what that little boy went through, it's not entertainment. It's not a story to be packaged and sold. Mia considered this. Mom would have taken it. The casual mention of her mother hit Evan like a slap. Mia rarely brought up Jessica, who'd left when Mia was 3, claiming motherhood was suffocating her artistic spirit. Last Evan had heard she was living in Portland with someone she'd met at a poetry workshop. Maybe, Evan said carefully, people make different choices. Do you think she's seen the news? Do you think she knows what happened? I don't know, sweetheart. Would she come back if she knew? The hope in Mia's voice was heartbreaking. Even after 5 years, part of her still waited for her mother to walk through the door. I don't think so, baby. This doesn't change who she is or why she left. Mia nodded, trying to look unbothered, but Evan saw her chin trembling. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. The door opened again, but this time it wasn't medical staff. Laura Sterling entered looking more composed than yesterday, but still tired. Ethan was with her carrying a tablet and wearing clothes that probably cost more than Evan's monthly salary. I hope we're not interrupting, Laura said. Of course not. Come in. Ethan immediately gravitated toward Mia, showing her something on his tablet. I've been analyzing the statistical probability of what happened, he said, without preamble. The chances of someone with no combat training successfully intervening in an active shooter situation are approximately 1 in 4,000. Cool.
Mia said, though she clearly had no idea what to make of this information. It's not cool, Ethan corrected. It's statistically improbable, which makes your father either very lucky or very stupid. Ethan, Laura said sharply, what? Those are the only logical conclusions. He's not stupid, Mia said, her voice fierce. He saved you, didn't he? Yes, but... Then shut up about statistics and just say thank you. Ethan blinked, apparently not used to being told to shut up. Thank you, he said after a moment, then added, Your father's bravery quotient must be exceptionally high to override basic self-preservation instincts. Is that your way of calling him brave? Mia asked. I suppose it is. Then just say that. Geez, do you always talk like a computer? I talk like someone with a properly developed vocabulary.
You talk like someone who needs more normal friends. Laura and Evan exchanged glances, both fighting smiles. Their children were bickering like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. Mr. Cole, Laura said, I need to discuss some developments with you. Children, why don't you go to the family lounge? Ethan, show Mia that game you were playing earlier. The physics simulation. The fun one, Ethan, the one with the birds. After the kids left, Mia, practically dragging a reluctant Ethan, Laura's expression grew serious. The media situation has escalated. Someone leaked your address, your work schedule, even Mia's school information. What do you mean leaked? Posted it online. Social media forums everywhere. People are already gathering at your apartment building, at Morrison Industries. The principal at Mia's school called. They're requesting guidance on handling the situation. Evan felt the blood drain from his face. They're at her school. Not yet, but they will be. Tomorrow morning, when she would normally return, there will be cameras waiting. Laura pulled out her phone, showed him a video. His apartment building was surrounded by people, reporters, gawkers, some carrying signs supporting him, others condemning him for what they called a publicity stunt. This is insane, Evan breathed. I just pushed a kid out of the way. You saved my son's life, Laura corrected. And like it or not, that makes you part of our world now. The scrutiny, the judgment, the complete loss of privacy, this is what we deal with every day. I didn't ask for this. No, you didn't, which is why I want to help you navigate it. She pulled out a folder, placed it on his bed. I've had my lawyers draw up some paperwork, not charity, she added quickly, seeing his expression. A job offer. Evan opened the folder, his eyes widening at the numbers. Community Safety Advisor, I don't even know what that means. It means you'd help develop safety protocols for our facilities, review security plans, provide input based on your unique perspective. Laura's smile was wry. It's a real position with real responsibilities, not a handout. The salary reflects the value of keeping my son alive. The salary was more than he'd make in 5 years as a janitor. It included health insurance, a company car education fund for Mia, everything he'd ever wanted to provide for his daughter, but never could. This is too much, he said. It's not enough, Laura countered. But it's what I can offer without insulting you. Please, Mr. Cole, let me do this. Before he could respond, his phone, which he'd turned back on, exploded with alerts. Not calls this time, but news notifications, all with variations of the same headline, Hero Janitor's Dark Past Revealed. Evan's heart sank as he opened one of the articles. They'd found it. The thing he'd never told anyone, not even Mia. The reason he'd left Chicago 15 years ago. The incident at the warehouse where he'd worked security. The fire that had killed 3 people. The investigation that had cleared him of wrongdoing but left questions. He'd been 22 working night shifts to pay for community college. The fire had started in a section he was supposed to patrol, but he'd been in another part of the building helping a coworker who'd fallen and injured himself. The investigation had concluded the fire was arson, likely insurance fraud by the owner. Evan had been cleared, but the families of the victims had always wondered if he'd been where he was supposed to be. Could he have spotted the fire earlier? Could those 3 people have lived? They make it sound like I was negligent, Evan said, his voice hollow. Like I chose to let people die. Laura took the phone, read quickly. This is a hit piece. Someone's feeding them information, shaping a narrative. She looked at him sharply. Who knew about this? Nobody. I mean, it's public record, but I never told anyone here. I moved to New York to start fresh, get away from the guilt. The guilt from something that wasn't your fault?
3 people died. Maybe if I'd... Stop. Laura's voice was firm. I've read the report. I had my team pull everything the moment you became part of this story. You saved your coworker's life that night. The fire was deliberately set with accelerants. Even if you'd been in that section, you likely would have died too. You investigated me. I investigate everyone who comes near my son. Don't take it personally. She handed back his phone. The question is, who's pushing this story now and why? As if in answer, the phone rang. This time, the caller ID showed a name, Jessica Chen, Evan's ex-wife. He answered with trembling fingers. Jessica. Hello, Evan. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, cultured, slightly breathy with that hint of disappointment she'd perfected during their brief marriage. I see you've become famous. What do you want? To make sure our daughter is safe, of course. This situation you've created seems quite dangerous. The situation Jessica, I saved a child's life. And now our daughter is receiving death threats according to the news. Really, Evan was playing hero worth putting Mia at risk. Laura, who could apparently hear the conversation, held out her hand for the phone. Evan hesitated, then handed it over. Miss Chen? This is Laura Sterling. I'm going to speak plainly. Whatever angle you're working, whatever you think you can gain from this situation, stop. Now. I don't know who you think you are. I'm someone with very expensive lawyers and no patience for opportunists. You abandoned your daughter 5 years ago. You have no custody, no visitation rights, and no say in her welfare. If you attempt to insert yourself into this situation, if you speak to the media, if you so much as tweet about Evan or Mia, I will bury you in legal actions that will take years to resolve and cost more than you'll see in a lifetime. Are we clear? There was silence on the other end. Are we clear? Yes, Jessica said finally, her voice small. Good. Don't call again. Laura hung up and handed the phone back. She's already given 2 interviews to tabloids. My team is working on killing the stories. Evan stared at her. Why are you doing all this? Because you saved my son, Laura said simply, and because the media is trying to crucify you for it. The warehouse story, your ex-wife, next they'll probably find some kid you went to kindergarten with who remembers you eating paste. She stood smoothing her skirt. This is coordinated, Mr. Cole. Someone is actively working to destroy your reputation. But why? Who benefits from... Evan stopped, the realization hitting him. Webb, the shooter. He has friends, supporters. They want to make me look bad so he looks better in comparison. That's one theory. Another is that someone wants to hurt me by destroying the man who saved my son. I have many enemies, Mr. Cole. Some of them would see this as an opportunity. The weight of it all pressed down on Evan like a physical thing. He was a pawn in games he didn't understand, played by people he'd never meet for stakes he couldn't fathom. I just wanted to take my daughter to a movie, he said quietly. I know. Laura's voice was surprisingly gentle. And I just wanted to give my son a normal evening. Neither of us got what we wanted, but we're here now. The question is what we do next. The door burst open, making them both jump. Mia ran in tears streaming down her face, Ethan right behind her, looking stricken. Dad, they're saying terrible things. Mia held out Ethan's tablet. They're saying you let people die.
They're saying Mom's coming to take me away. They're saying, hey, come here. Evan pulled her against him, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. It's okay. None of that's true, baby girl. But everyone's reading it. Everyone at school will think, I fixed it, Ethan interrupted. Everyone looked at him. He adjusted his glasses, looking slightly embarrassed. I created a counter-narrative algorithm. It's already propagating across social media platforms. You did what? Laura asked. I hacked into the primary news aggregators and adjusted their trending algorithms to prioritize positive stories about Mr. Cole. I also created approximately 3,000 bot accounts to flood comment sections with supportive messages and factual corrections to the false narratives. Ethan Sterling, you did not just admit to cybercrime in front of witnesses, Laura said, though she looked more impressed than angry. It's not crime if it's justice, Ethan said firmly.
Mr. Cole saved me. The least I can do is save his reputation. You can't fight the entire internet, kid, Evan said. Watch me, Ethan replied with a determination that reminded Evan of the boy's mother. I've already traced the source of the warehouse story. It originated from an IP address associated with Marcus Webb's former colleague at Morrison Industries. They're coordinating the smear campaign through an encrypted messaging app, but I'm working on breaking their encryption. How do you know how to do all this? Mia asked, staring at him with something approaching awe. When you're homeschooled and have access to unlimited computing resources, you learn things, Ethan said with a shrug. Also, I might have been slightly bored. Laura pinched the bridge of her nose. We're going to have a long talk about appropriate use of technology, young man. After I finish saving Mr. Cole's reputation. After you finish saving Mr. Cole's reputation, Laura agreed with a sigh. Evan watched this exchange with a mixture of amazement and concern. A 7-year-old was hacking news sites to defend him. His ex-wife was trying to capitalize on his situation. Someone was actively working to destroy him. And outside, the crowd continued to grow. We need to get you somewhere safe, Laura said. Both of you. The offer stands my property in Westchester, at least until this calms down. Dad, maybe we should, Mia said quietly. I don't want to go back to the apartment if all those people are there. Evan looked at his daughter's frightened face, then at Ethan's determined expression, then at Laura's concerned one. Every instinct told him to handle this himself, to not accept charity, to maintain his independence. But this wasn't about his pride anymore. It was about keeping Mia safe. Okay, he said finally, but just temporarily, until things calm down. Laura's relief was visible. I'll have Harrison arrange everything. You'll be discharged tomorrow. That's what they tell me. Then tomorrow you disappear. We'll get you out quietly before the media knows you've left. She gathered her things, then paused. Mr. Cole Evan, I know this isn't what you wanted, but sometimes life forces us into roles we never asked for. The question isn't whether we deserve them, but what we do with them. After she and Ethan left, Ethan promising to text Mia updates on his cyber campaign, the room felt too quiet. Mia curled up against Evan's good side, both of them staring at the ceiling. Everything's different now, isn't it? She asked. Yeah, baby girl. Everything's different. Are we still going to be us? Even with all this craziness? Evan pressed a kiss to her forehead. We're always going to be us. No matter where we live or what people say or how crazy things get. You and me against the world, remember? You and me against the world, Mia repeated, but she sounded uncertain. Outside, someone had started playing music. Evan recognized the song Hero by Mariah Carey. Someone else was giving a speech about citizen bravery. A news helicopter circled overhead, its spotlight occasionally sweeping across their window. His phone buzzed with another notification. This time, it was from his supervisor at Morrison Industries. Don't bother coming back. Your position has been terminated. Your final check will be mailed. 9 years. Perfect attendance, gone with a text message. But then another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Cole, I'm Sarah Walsh from Channel 12. I want you to know that not all of us are vultures. Some of us still believe in reporting the truth. When you're ready to talk, really talk, not for money or ratings. I'm here. Then another from a different unknown number. You don't know me, but you saved my daughter once. Not from a bullet, but from drowning at the community pool 3 years ago. You probably don't remember you just jumped in and pulled her out like it was nothing. You're a hero to our family, always have been. Evan did remember vaguely. A little girl who'd slipped into the deep end while her parents were distracted. He'd been there with Mia, had reacted without thinking, just like with Ethan. Maybe that was who he was. Not a hero, not someone special, just someone who couldn't stand by when kids were in danger. It wasn't noble or calculated. It was just instinct. More texts came through, some supportive, some hostile, some from reporters, some from strangers. His old life, the anonymous existence of Evan Cole, the janitor, was officially over. In its place was something he didn't yet understand, a public persona being shaped by forces beyond his control. But as Mia's breathing deepened into sleep, as the noise outside became white noise, as his shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, Evan made a decision. He couldn't control what people said or thought.
He couldn't fight every narrative or answer every accusation, but he could protect his daughter. He could accept help when offered. He could try to navigate this new reality with some measure of dignity. Tomorrow they would leave the hospital. Tomorrow they would vanish into Laura Sterling's protection. Tomorrow they would start figuring out what came next. But tonight, in this moment, they were just a father and daughter holding on to each other while the world went insane around them. And somehow, that was enough. The crowd outside began to disperse as the night wore on, but Evan knew they'd be back. They always came back. The story was too good, too perfect for the media age, the minimum wage hero, the billionaire CEO, the innocent children caught in the crossfire of adult violence and vengeance. Somewhere in the city, Marcus Webb sat in a cell, probably wondering how his plan for revenge had created a folk hero. Somewhere else, Jessica was probably calculating how to monetize her newfound relevance. And somewhere in a mansion overlooking the city, Laura Sterling was mobilizing resources to protect a janitor and his daughter, because that janitor had saved the most precious thing in her world. The last thing Evan saw before exhaustion finally claimed him was a text from Ethan. Counter-narrative achieving viral status. Public opinion shifting. You're winning, Mr. Cole. Winning. As if this was a game that could be won or lost rather than a situation to be survived. But as sleep took him, Evan allowed himself a small moment of hope. Maybe they would get through this. Maybe the world would move on to the next story. Maybe somehow he and Mia would find their way back to something resembling normal. Or maybe normal was gone forever, and they'd have to build something new from the ashes of their old life. Either way, they'd face it together. The escape from the hospital was orchestrated with military precision. At 4 a.m, while the media crowd slept in their vans or grabbed coffee from the 24-hour diner across the street, Harrison's team moved. Evan found himself in a wheelchair. He didn't need wearing a maintenance worker's uniform being pushed through service corridors by a man who never spoke. Mia walked beside them, dressed as a candy striper, her face partially hidden by an oversized cap. "This is like a spy movie," she whispered, and despite everything, there was excitement in her voice. Children could find adventure in the strangest circumstances. They emerged through a loading dock where an unremarkable van waited, the kind used by hundreds of delivery services throughout the city. No one looked twice as they pulled away, joining the early morning traffic of workers beginning their day. Through the tinted windows, Evan watched his old world recede. Morrison Industries was just a few blocks away. He'd walked these streets thousands of times, knew every crack in the sidewalk, every broken streetlight, every corner where homeless veterans set up their cardboard signs. "You okay?" Harrison asked from the driver's seat. It was the first time he'd shown anything resembling human concern. "Just thinking about how fast everything changes," Evan replied. The drive to Westchester took an hour, traffic gradually thinning as they left the city proper. The buildings grew shorter, then gave way to trees. Lawns appeared, then grew larger until they were passing estates hidden behind walls and hedges. Mia pressed her face to the window, watching this new world unfold. "Dad, look at that house. It has a fountain. An actual fountain in the front yard. That's not a house, sweetie. That's just the gatehouse."
The gatehouse. Then how big is the actual house? She got her answer when Harrison turned into a driveway marked only by a discrete number on a stone pillar. The gates opened smoothly, revealing a road that wound through perfect landscaping for another quarter-mile before the house came into view. "Holy!" Mia breathed, then caught herself. "I mean, wow!" It wasn't a mansion in the ostentatious sense. Laura Sterling had better taste than that. It was a colonial revival, all clean lines and perfect proportions, large enough to be impressive, but not so large as to be absurd. The kind of place that whispered money rather than shouting it. "This is the guest house," Harrison said, pulling up to a smaller structure, though smaller was relative. It was still twice the size of anywhere Evan had ever lived. "Ms. Sterling thought you'd be more comfortable with your own space." The interior was furnished in what Evan guessed was expensive simplicity. Everything was neutral colors and natural materials, comfortable without being casual. Mia ran from room to room, her footsteps echoing on hardwood floors. "Dad, there's 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms,
and the kitchen has one of those fridges with the water in the door. Evan stood in the living room feeling profoundly out of place. His work boots, the only shoes he'd had at the hospital, seemed wrong against the Persian rug. His clothes, the same ones from the shooting with the addition of the maintenance uniform shirt, felt like a costume. "There's clothing in the master bedroom," Harrison said, reading his discomfort. "We guessed its sizes. Food in the kitchen. The main house is a 5-minute walk through the gardens. Ms. Sterling would like to see you for dinner at 7. "This is too much," Evan said. "This is necessary," Harrison corrected. "Your apartment building is still surrounded. Mia's school has had to hire additional security. 3 different people have tried to break into your actual apartment claiming they wanted souvenirs." He pulled out his phone, showed Evan a photo. Someone had spray-painted "Hero" on his apartment door. Someone else had written "Fraud" over it. "The world has lost its mind," Evan muttered. "The world was always insane. You just weren't famous enough to notice." Harrison headed for the door, then paused. "Some advice: don't fight this. Don't try to go back to what was. That life is over. The sooner you accept that, the easier this transition will be." After he left, Evan found Mia in what she'd already claimed as her room, bouncing on a bed that looked like it cost more than his car. "Can you believe this place?" she asked. "It's like we're different people." "We're not different people," Evan said firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "We're the same people in a different place, that's all. But for how long Ms. Sterling can't let us live here forever?" It was a good question, one Evan didn't have an answer for. He was saved from trying by his phone ringing. The number was unfamiliar, but he'd learned to answer everything it could be important. "Mr. Cole." "This is Father Miguel from St. Catherine's Community Center." Evan sat up straighter. Father Miguel had been a fixture in their neighborhood for 20 years, running programs for kids, food banks, for families in need. He was one of the good ones. "Father, how did you get this number?" "Your landlord, Mr. Petrov. He thought you should know what's happening here." The priest's voice was heavy. "The memorial has grown quite large." "Memorial?" "People have been leaving flowers, cards, toys for children. The spot where you were shot, someone's marked it. They're calling it sacred ground." "That's ridiculous." "Perhaps, but I'm not calling about that. I'm calling because someone else has been here. An old woman, Eleanor Webb. She's been sitting by the memorial for hours crying. She says she needs to tell you something about your grandfather." "My grandfather? He died when I was 3. I barely remember him." "She says she knew him, says there are things you need to know." "Mr. Cole, I wouldn't bother you with this, but she seems quite desperate, and given everything that's happened..." Evan looked at Mia, who was pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. "Father, I can't come back to the city right now. It's not safe." "I understand, but perhaps I could bring her to you? She's quite elderly, no threat to anyone." It was probably nothing, some confused old woman mixing up memories. But Eleanor Webb, the shooter's mother, had known something, had mentioned something about recognition in her eyes when she'd looked at him. "Okay," Evan said finally, "but not here. Somewhere public, safe. There's a diner in Yonkers, the Blue Moon. Could you meet us there in 2 hours?" Evan agreed and hung up. Mia was looking at him with curious eyes. "We're going to meet someone," he told her. "Someone who might have known your great-grandfather. I thought we were supposed to stay hidden." "We are, but some things are worth the risk." 2 hours later, they sat in a corner booth at the Blue Moon Diner, a place that had probably looked exactly the same since 1962. Father Miguel arrived first, his familiar face a comfort in this strange new reality. Behind him, moving slowly with a walker, came Eleanor Webb. She looked older than she had in the hospital, as if the past few days had aged her years. Her eyes, when they found Evan's face, filled with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You look just like him." "Like who?" "Samuel Cole, your grandfather." She lowered herself into the booth with Father Miguel's help. "I was 17 when I met him. He worked at the factory with my father. Such a quiet man, but kind. Always kind." "Mrs. Webb, I appreciate..." "Please let me finish. I need to tell this story. I've held it too long." She pulled out a photograph, yellow with age. It showed a man in work clothes standing in front of a brick building. The resemblance to Evan was unmistakable, the same jaw, the same eyes, the same way of holding himself slightly apart from the world. This was taken 6 months before the fire, Eleanor said. The Riverside factory fire. 43 children were trapped in the daycare on the 3rd floor. The stairs had collapsed. Everyone said it was hopeless. Evan had heard fragments of this story from his mother, but she'd always been vague about details lost in her own grief and bourbon. Your grandfather was walking past when it started. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd taken a different route to work because of construction. But when he heard those children screaming, Eleanor's voice broke. He didn't hesitate, ran straight into that building. The news said a man saved those kids, but they never released a name, Father Miguel said softly.
The family requested privacy. Samuel made 13 trips, Eleanor continued. 13 trips up a ladder that was already burning through smoke so thick you couldn't see your hand. He saved 43 children, every single one. Then why? Evan started, then stopped. He knew why. His grandfather hadn't walked away from that building. The 14th trip, Eleanor whispered. He went back because he thought he heard another child. There wasn't one all were accounted for, but he didn't know that. The floor collapsed when he was searching the last room. Mia, who had been silent until now, spoke up. He died trying to save someone who wasn't there. He died making sure no child was left behind, Eleanor corrected gently, just like your father made sure my son didn't succeed in his terrible plan. I don't understand, Evan said. Why didn't anyone know about this? Why keep it secret? Eleanor pulled out another photograph. This one was clearly newer, though still decades old. It showed a group of children all around 7 or 8 years old standing in front of a school. The 43 children he saved, she said. My daughter was one of them. She was at the daycare that day because I was working. She grew up, became a teacher, had a son. Marcus, my grandson. The one who... She stopped, unable to continue. Your daughter was one of the kids my grandfather saved. Evan asked, his mind reeling. Yes, and there's more. Eleanor pointed to another child in the photo, a girl with distinctive eyes and a determined expression even at that young age. That's Laura Sterling. Well, Laura Chen then. Her parents were immigrants, worked double shifts. She was at that daycare every day. The diner seemed to spin around Evan. He gripped the table, trying to process what he was hearing. Laura Sterling was one of the 43. She was the last one out. Your grandfather carried her down himself on his 13th trip. She always said she remembered his face, remembered him telling her she was safe now. You're safe, kid, Mia whispered, and everyone turned to look at her. That's what Dad said to Ethan. The exact same words. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. 2 generations of Cole men, 2 generations of Sterling children. It's like the universe was balancing something. Laura knows, Evan asked. She didn't at first. The children were young, traumatized. Most forgot details. But when the family started the fund... What fund? Eleanor pulled out a manila envelope, handed it to Evan with shaking hands. The 43 families. They tried to help your grandmother, but she refused, too proud. So they created a fund hoping someday... Here. It's all documented. Evan opened the envelope, his eyes widening at the contents. Bank statements, legal documents, 43 signatures on a trust agreement. The Samuel Cole Hero Fund established 1992 current value. He had to read the number 3 times. $2.3 million, Father Miguel read over his shoulder. Dear Lord. Each family contributed what they could when they could, Eleanor explained. Some gave $20 a month. Others, like Laura's family, when their restaurant business took off, gave more. It's been sitting there waiting for Samuel's descendants to be found. But I was alive. My mother was alive. How did no one... Your grandmother moved after Samuel died, changed her name back to her maiden name, tried to disappear from the grief. Your mother was raised as Patricia Mills, not Patricia Cole. It was only when I saw you on the news, heard your name, saw your face, I knew. And when I checked the records, confirmed your mother's maiden name. Evan stared at the papers, unable to speak.
His entire life, he'd struggled with money, watched his mother drink herself to death in poverty, raised Mia on minimum wage and food stamps. And this had been sitting here waiting. Why didn't my grandmother want help? Mia asked, always direct. Pride, Eleanor said simply. And grief. She said Samuel wouldn't want charity, that he'd just done what anyone would do. Sound familiar? She looked pointedly at Evan. This changes everything, Father Miguel said softly. Mr. Cole, you're not just some random hero. You're literally carrying on your grandfather's legacy. I didn't know, Evan said numbly. When I jumped in front of that bullet, I didn't know any of this. That makes it more powerful, not less, Eleanor said. She reached across the table, gripped his hand with her frail ones. My grandson tried to kill a child whose life exists because of your grandfather's sacrifice, and you stopped him. You completed a circle that's been waiting to close for 30 years.
The diner had gone quiet around them. The few other patrons were staring, and Evan realized someone was recording with their phone. The story would be out within hours. We should go, he said, starting to stand. Wait. Eleanor pulled out one more item, a pocket watch, its gold surface worn smooth with age. This was Samuel's. He was carrying it when your grandmother wanted it buried with him, but the funeral director saved it, gave it to me years later when he was retiring. I've been keeping it, hoping someday. She placed it in Evan's palm. It was heavier than he expected, warm from her touch. When he opened it, the inside was inscribed, Time is precious. Waste none of it. S.C. The hands don't move quite right, Eleanor said. Damaged in the fire, but it still keeps time just a little different from everyone else's. Like the Cole men themselves, Evan thought, moving to their own rhythm, responding to their own calls. His phone rang. Laura's number. Evan, where are you? Her voice was urgent. Harrison says you left the property. I'm in Yonkers, at a diner. Laura. I need to talk to you about... Get back here now. Someone leaked your location. The media is already mobilizing. Through the diner window, Evan could see the first news van pulling up. Then another. How did they move so fast? We need to go, he told the others, helping Eleanor to her feet. Mr. Cole, she said urgently. The 43 families. They want to meet you. They want to thank you. Later, he said, though he wondered if there would be a later or if he'd spend the rest of his life running from moments like this. They made it to the car just as the first reporter reached them. Mr. Cole, is it true your grandfather was the hero of the Riverside fire? No comment, Evan said, shielding Mia as they moved. Did you know Laura Sterling's life was saved by your grandfather? That stopped him. He turned, saw the reporter, a young woman with hungry eyes and a predatory smile. Sometimes, he said quietly, the universe writes its own stories. We're just the characters trying to keep up. It wasn't much of a quote, but it was all he had. They drove away as more vans arrived, the story already spreading across social media like wildfire. By the time they reached the gate of Laura's property, his phone had hundreds of messages. Laura was waiting in the driveway of the guest house, Ethan beside her. Her face was unreadable as they got out of the car. Is it true? She asked without preamble. About your grandfather. Evan held out the photograph Eleanor had given him, the one of the 43 children. Laura took it with trembling hands, studied it. Oh my God, she whispered. That's me. That little girl is me. She looked up at him, her composed CEO facade completely gone. I remember him. Not clearly, but I remember being carried, someone telling me I was safe. My parents talked about him like he was a saint. The man who gave his life for children he didn't even know. Apparently saving Sterling children is a Cole family tradition, Evan said, attempting levity but achieving only exhaustion. Laura moved suddenly, pulling him into a fierce hug that made his shoulder scream in protest. This can't be coincidence. It can't be. Mom, you're hurting him, Ethan said, but he was staring at Evan with something approaching awe. The probability of this occurrence is effectively zero. 2 generations, same families, same sacrifice pattern. It's statistically impossible unless what? Mia asked. Unless there's something in the Cole genetic code, a predisposition toward heroic intervention, a literal hero gene. There's no such thing, Evan said.
Isn't there? Laura pulled back, wiping her eyes. Your grandfather ran into a burning building for children he didn't know. You jumped in front of a bullet for a child you didn't know. That's not normal human behavior. That's something else. That's being a decent person when it counts, Evan said firmly. No, Laura said. I've met a lot of decent people. Most of them would have frozen, would have thought about their own safety, their own families. You didn't think. Neither did Samuel. That's not decency, that's programming. Before Evan could argue, Harrison appeared, his expression grim. We have a situation. The media has the story about Samuel Cole. It's everywhere, and he hesitated. What you? Laura demanded. The 43 families, they're organizing. They want a press conference. They want to publicly thank Mr. Cole to tell the full story. All of them doctors, teachers, a senator, CEOs. The children Samuel saved grew up to be quite accomplished. A senator? Evan asked weakly. Senator Patricia Kemp. She was 4 when your grandfather carried her out. She's flying in from Washington, says she owes her entire life to the Cole family. Evan sank onto the front steps of the guest house, his head in his hands. This was spiraling beyond anything he could have imagined. He just wanted to save a kid, that's all. A simple act that should have been a footnote in a police report. Instead, it had become something else entirely. Mia sat beside him, slipping her small hand into his. Dad, are you okay? I don't know, baby girl. This is all... It's too much. Great-grandpa would have felt the same way, she said wisely. But he did it anyway, and so did you. Laura knelt in front of them, her designer dress getting dirty on the gravel, but she didn't seem to care. Evan, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to understand something. Those 43 children didn't just survive, they thrived. They became doctors who saved lives, teachers who shaped minds, parents who raised the next generation. Your grandfather's sacrifice rippled out in ways he never could have imagined. And now, Evan asked, now it's happening again. Ethan will grow up. He'll run my company someday or build his own. He'll innovate, create, employ thousands. The children he has, the lives he touches, they all exist because of you, because of this. She gestured to his bandaged shoulder. I'm just a janitor, Evan said quietly. No, Laura said firmly. You were never just anything. You were Samuel Cole's grandson, carrying his DNA, his instincts, his inability to stand by when children were in danger. You were always meant for this moment. You're saying this was fate. I'm saying that sometimes the universe arranges things, puts people where they need to be when they need to be there. Your grandfather took a different route to work because of construction. You decided to take Mia to that specific showing of that specific movie. Marcus Webb chose that moment to act on his rage. All of these things had to align for you to be in position to save my son. And for your son to exist because my grandfather saved you, Mia added, showing she'd been following the complex web of connections. Ethan, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. We need to control the narrative. Everyone looked at him. The media will sensationalize this, turn it into something mystical or ridiculous. We need to present it properly, a press conference but managed. The 43 families telling their stories, but in a way that honors both Samuel and Evan. Ethan's right, Laura said. If we don't control this, it will control us. Evan, I know you hate the spotlight, but I don't have a choice, he finished. I haven't had a choice since the moment I heard that first shot. You had a choice, Laura corrected. You chose to save my son. Everything else follows from that. Evan's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice was familiar. Mr. Cole, this is Senator Patricia Kemp. I believe we need to talk about your grandfather and about the future the 43 of us would like to build in his name. As Evan listened to the senator describe plans for the Samuel Cole Foundation for safety initiatives in schools, for turning his grandfather's sacrifice into a movement that could save thousands more children, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about him anymore. It had never been about him. It was about something larger, a legacy he'd inherited without knowing it, a responsibility that had been passed down through blood and circumstance. He looked at Mia, who was watching him with those wise eyes that seemed to understand everything. At Ethan, the brilliant boy whose life stretched ahead with infinite possibility. at Laura, who had been saved as a child and had grown up to save others through innovation and employment. The circle Eleanor Webb had talked about wasn't closing. It was widening, spreading out in ripples that would touch lives for generations. "Yes, Senator," he said into the phone. "I'll be there. We'll tell the story, all of it." When he hung up, Laura was smiling through tears. "Your grandfather would be proud." "I hope so," Evan said, fingering the pocket watch in his pocket. Its damaged hands ticked on, keeping their own time, marking moments that mattered more than mere minutes and hours. Tomorrow, he would stand before cameras and tell the world about Samuel Cole, about sacrifice and legacy, and the strange ways fate connected lives across decades. He would hate every moment of the spotlight, but he would do it anyway. Because that's what Cole men did, apparently. They ran toward danger instead of away. They saved children who weren't their own. They carried forward legacies they didn't ask for but couldn't refuse. As the sun set over Westchester, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Evan held his daughter close and thought about circles and sacrifices, about grandfathers and grandsons, about bullets taken and fires entered. Somewhere in the city, 43 families were preparing to tell their stories. Somewhere else, Marcus Webb sat in a cell, his attempt at revenge having created something beautiful instead of destructive. And somewhere in the space between past and future, Samuel Cole's spirit seemed to whisper on the wind, "You're safe, kid. You're all safe now." The watch in Evan's pocket ticked on its broken hands, moving steadily forward, measuring not time, but moments of grace. Acts of courage, the immeasurable distance between who we are and who we're called to be. The morning of the press conference arrived with unseasonable warmth for late September, as if the universe itself had decided to spotlight the occasion. Evan stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the guest house, struggling with a tie Laura had sent over. His hands shook slightly, not from his healing shoulder, but from the weight of what lay ahead. "Here, Dad let me help," Mia said, appearing in the doorway. She'd grown up so much in the past week, her 8-year-old face carrying a solemnity that hadn't been there before. She stood on the toilet seat to reach properly, her small fingers working the silk with surprising expertise. "Where did you learn to tie a tie?" "YouTube. Ethan showed me. He says you can learn anything on YouTube." She finished with a gentle pat on the knot. "There. You look like someone important now." "I'm not someone important, sweetheart. I'm just—" "Dad, stop." Her voice was firm, almost maternal. "You keep saying you're just a janitor, just nobody special, but great-grandpa was just a factory worker, and he saved 43 kids. You were just walking to our car and you saved Ethan. Maybe just people are the most important ones." Before Evan could respond, a knock came at the door. Laura entered dressed in a conservative black suit that somehow still managed to convey power and wealth. Ethan followed, carrying his ever-present tablet and wearing a suit that made him look like a miniature executive. "The car will be here in 15 minutes, Laura said, then stopped studying Evan. "You look good, professional." "I look like someone playing dress-up." "You look like someone about to honor his grandfather's memory," she corrected. "The families have been gathering since dawn. Senator Kemp has prepared remarks. The mayor is coming. The governor wanted to attend, but had a conflict." "This is insane," Evan muttered. "A week ago, I was mopping floors." "A week ago, my son was alive because your grandfather saved me 30 years ago, and now he's still alive because you saved him," Laura said. "Life is insane. We just pretend otherwise to get through our days." The ride to the venue, a historical society building in Midtown Manhattan, took an hour. Evan watched the city pass by through tinted windows, this place he'd called home for 15 years but had never really belonged to. Now somehow he was about to become part of its history. "Mr. Cole," Ethan said, suddenly looking up from his tablet. "I've run facial recognition on all the photographs from 1992. I've identified all 43 children and tracked their current locations. 39 are still alive. 35 are attending today. What happened to the other 4? 2 died in military service, both heroes awarded posthumously. One died of cancer 3 years ago. She was a pediatric surgeon, saved hundreds of children herself. The last died in a car accident, but not before becoming a successful teacher and mother of 4. Lives lived because Samuel Cole had run into a burning building. Entire family trees that existed because one man couldn't stand to hear children screaming. I've also analyzed the economic impact, Ethan continued, because of course he had. The 43 survivors have collectively generated over $2 billion in economic activity, created over 3,000 jobs, and raised 127 children. The ripple effect of your grandfather's sacrifice is quantifiable and substantial. Ethan, honey, not everything needs to be reduced to numbers, Laura said gently.
But numbers help make sense of things, Ethan protested. They prove that heroism has measurable value beyond the emotional component. Some things can't be measured, Evan said, thinking of the weight of the pocket watch in his jacket. Some things just are.
They arrived to find the street blocked off police barriers holding back a crowd that had to number in the thousands. Signs were everywhere. Cole family heroes, saving lives across generations. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Evan. Someone had blown up the old photograph of Samuel Cole to poster-size his steady gaze looking out at a world he'd never lived to see change.
Jesus, Evan breathed. Language, Mia said automatically, then gasped herself as she saw the crowd. Harrison met them at a side entrance, his professional demeanor slightly cracked. It's bigger than we expected. Social media has been promoting this all night. People are calling it the most important story of human kindness in decades. It's just a press conference, Evan said weakly. No, sir. It's a reckoning. A reminder that good people do exist, that heroism isn't just in movies. Harrison guided them through security checkpoints. The 43 are waiting in the green room.
They wanted to meet you privately first. The Green Room was actually a historical society library, its walls lined with books chronicling New York's past. About to be added to that history, Evan thought with a mixture of pride and terror. The room fell silent as they entered 35 pairs of eyes turning to him. They ranged in age from 37 to 42. All the children from that daycare now grown into middle age, doctors, lawyers, teachers, artists, parents, workers, a complete cross-section of America united only by the fact that they'd once been trapped in a burning building and Samuel Cole had refused to let them die. Senator Patricia Kemp stepped forward first. She was shorter than she appeared on television, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that had seen too much of how government actually worked. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I was 4 years old. I remember the smoke, the heat, the absolute terror. And then these arms lifting me, this voice saying, 'I've got you, little one. You're going to be okay.' Your grandfather's arms, your grandfather's voice." One by one, they came forward. Dr. James Chen, who ran a clinic in Chinatown providing free health care to immigrants. I became a doctor because someone I'd never met decided my life was worth saving. Maria Santos, a teacher in the Bronx. Every child I've taught, every life I've touched exists because Samuel Cole ran into that fire. Robert Anderson, a contractor who built affordable housing. I named my son Samuel. He's 15 now, wants to be a firefighter. The chain continues. They all had stories, memories, fragments of that day. Some remembered nothing but smoke and fear. Others had crystal clear images of Samuel's face, his calm voice cutting through their panic. Laura stood with them, no longer the billionaire CEO, but just another survivor, another life saved. "We tried to find your family for 30 years, an older man said, Dr. William Foster, according to Ethan's whispered identification, a cancer researcher whose work had led to breakthrough treatments. "We wanted to thank them, to help them to do something. Your grandmother vanished so completely we started to think Samuel Cole might have been a myth." "She was grieving," Evan said, understanding his grandmother better now. "She didn't want thanks for losing her husband. She just wanted him back." "And now," Senator Kemp asked, "what do you want?" Evan looked at these successful, accomplished people all existing because his grandfather had been walking past a building at the right moment. "I want to tell his story, and I want it to mean something." "It already does," Laura said, "but we're going to make it mean more." They moved to the main hall where hundreds of reporters waited. The stage had been set with 43 chairs for the survivors, a podium with multiple microphones, and a large screen showing the photograph of Samuel Cole. Evan found himself at the podium, his mouth dry, his hands gripping the edges hard enough to leave marks. The crowd quieted, hundreds of faces turning toward him expectantly. Cameras clicked like mechanical rainfall. Someone coughed. A phone buzzed and was quickly silenced. I never knew my grandfather was a hero. Evan began, his voice rougher than he'd intended. He died when I was 3. My mother, lost in her own pain, rarely spoke of him. I grew up knowing only that he'd died young, that he'd been a good man, that I had his eyes. He pulled out the pocket watch, held it up. This was his. The hands don't work right anymore, damaged in the fire that killed him. But it still keeps time just differently from everyone else's. I think that's appropriate. Samuel Cole moved to his own time, responded to his own calling. The room was completely silent now, even the photographers pausing in their work. A week ago, I was nobody special. A janitor at Morrison Industries, a single father trying to make ends meet. Then I heard gunshots, saw a child in danger, and my body moved before my brain could tell it not to. I didn't know that child was Ethan Sterling. I didn't know his mother was Laura Sterling. I certainly didn't know she was one of the 43 children my grandfather had saved 30 years ago. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This detail hadn't been widely reported yet. People keep calling me a hero, but I'm not. I'm just someone who couldn't watch a child get hurt. The real hero died 30 years ago thinking he heard one more child crying in a burning building. He was wrong, all 43 were safe, but he went back anyway because that's who he was. Someone who couldn't leave even the possibility of a child behind. Evan looked at the survivors, all watching him with tears streaming down their faces. These 43 people have lived extraordinary lives. They've saved others, built businesses, raised families, contributed to society in ways my grandfather never could have imagined. His 15 minutes of heroism created centuries of combined life, thousands of ripple effects, countless moments of grace. He paused, finding Mia in the crowd. She gave him a small thumbs up. I've been asked what I want, what I need, how people can help. The answer is simple. I want Samuel Cole's sacrifice to inspire others. I want people to understand that heroism isn't about superpowers or special training. It's about that moment when you have to choose between your safety and someone else's life, and you choose them. Senator Kemp stepped forward. Which is why we're announcing the Samuel Cole Foundation today. Funded initially by the 43 families but open to public contribution, it will provide training for civilian emergency response support for families of those who die saving others and education programs teaching children about everyday heroism. We're also announcing the Safe Haven Initiative, Laura added, taking another microphone. Inspired by Mr. Cole's words to my son, "You're safe, kid," it will create rapid response networks in communities training ordinary people to protect children in crisis situations. Every one of us has succeeded in life because Samuel Cole didn't hesitate, Dr. Chen said. Now we want to create a world where more people like him and his grandson are ready to act when moments of crisis arrive. Questions erupted from the reporters, a cacophony of voices seeking answers, angles, drama. But Evan found himself oddly calm now. The story was out. The truth was known. His grandfather was no longer a forgotten casualty, but a remembered hero. Mr. Cole, how does it feel to know your grandfather saved the woman whose son you would save 30 years later? It feels like the universe has a sense of poetry, Evan replied. Do you believe in fate? I believe in coincidences that are too perfect to be coincidences. What would you say to Marcus Webb, the shooter? Evan thought carefully. I'd say that violence creates nothing but pain. His attempt at revenge failed because strangers chose to protect each other. That's always going to be stronger than hate. Will you accept the position at Sterling Industries? Yes, Evan said, surprising himself with the certainty. Not because I need the money, though I do, but because I want to help create safer environments for workers and their families. I want to honor my grandfather's memory by preventing other tragedies. What about the Samuel Cole Hero Fund? The $2.3 million. It will be managed by the foundation used to support families of everyday heroes. My grandfather wouldn't want his family enriched by his death. He'd want other families protected from similar losses. The questions continued for an hour. Through it all, the 43 stood behind him, a living wall of support. These strangers who weren't strangers, bound together by smoke and fear, and one man's refusal to let children die.
Finally, as the press conference wound down, a young reporter in the back raised her hand. Mr. Cole, what do you want your daughter to learn from all this? Evan looked at Mia, who was watching him with those wise eyes. I want her to know that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear. I want her to understand that every life has value, that every action has consequences, that every choice to help someone ripples outward in ways we can't imagine.
And I want her to know that being just anything, just a janitor, just a factory worker, just a kid, doesn't mean you can't change the world. Mia smiled, and in that smile, Evan saw his grandfather's determination, his mother's strength, despite her struggles, his own stubborn refusal to accept that ordinary people couldn't do extraordinary things. The formal event ended, but the story was just beginning. As the crowd dispersed, the 43 families stayed sharing more personal memories. Children and grandchildren were introduced the second and third generation ripples of Samuel Cole's sacrifice. "This is my daughter Emma," Dr. Foster said, presenting a young woman in medical school scrubs. "She exists because your grandfather saved me. She's going to be a pediatric surgeon. More children will be saved because Samuel Cole couldn't stand to hear children cry." The introductions continued, each one a testament to the power of a single moment's choice. By the time they finally left the Historical Society, the sun was setting again, painting the city in the same amber light as that night at the movie theater, though it felt like a lifetime ago. In the car returning to Westchester, Mia fell asleep against Evan's good shoulder. Ethan worked on his tablet designing what looked like a memorial website for Samuel Cole. Laura stared out the window, lost in thoughts of fate and fire and the strange ways lives interconnected. "You did good today," she said finally. "Your grandfather would be proud." "I hope so," Evan replied, feeling the weight of the pocket watch in his jacket. "I know so. You took an impossible situation and gave it meaning. You turned tragedy into purpose." "The 43 did that. I just stood at a podium and talked. You gave them permission to tell their story. You gave them a focus for their gratitude. Do you understand how rare that is? Most heroic acts are forgotten. Most sacrifices go unrecorded. But this one, because of you, will be remembered." Evan's phone buzzed with a message from Harrison. "Sir, you need to see this." Attached was a link to a news aggregate site. The story of Samuel Cole and the 43 had gone viral, not just nationally, but globally. Hatchback Cole Family Heroes was trending worldwide. People were sharing their own stories of everyday heroism of ordinary people who'd saved lives without thought of reward. But more importantly, applications to become EMTs, firefighters, and emergency responders had spiked dramatically in the past 6 hours. Training programs were reporting unprecedented interest. The Samuel Cole Foundation website, hastily constructed by Ethan during the press conference, had already received over $3 million in donations. "My God," Laura breathed, looking at the data. "This is becoming a movement." "Movements need leaders," Evan said uncomfortably. "No, they need symbols. And whether you wanted it or not, you and your grandfather have become those symbols. 2 generations of Cole men who couldn't walk past danger without walking into it." As they pulled into the estate, Evan saw something that made his heart stop. The guest house was surrounded by softly glowing lights, candles, hundreds of them placed there by people who'd somehow found the location despite security. "Don't worry," Harrison said over the phone. "We screened everyone. They're locals mostly. They just wanted to pay respects, I suppose, to you and your grandfather." Among the candles were flowers, children's toys, handwritten notes. Evan picked up one at random. "My father was one of the 43. Thank you for giving me a chance to exist. Jennifer Chen, age 12. Another, "I'm alive because my mom was in that daycare. She became a nurse and saved my dad's life during a heart attack. The chain of salvation continues. Michael Foster." And another, "I'm naming my son Samuel Evan. He'll know your family's story. He'll know that heroes are real. A grateful mother." Mia woke up rubbing her eyes. "Dad, why are there so many candles?" "People are saying thank you," Evan told her. "To great-grandpa, to him, to us, to the idea that people can be good." She considered this. "That's a lot of thank yous." "Yeah, baby girl, it is."
They stood there in the candlelight, four people brought together by violence but bound by something stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The media attention wouldn't stop. The threats from Marcus Webb's supporters would continue. The pressure to be perfect symbols of heroism would be crushing. But tonight, in the soft glow of 1,000 candles surrounded by the gratitude of strangers, Evan felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the peace of endings, but of beginnings. Not the peace of rest, but of purpose, finally found. "Dad," Mia said quietly, "do you think Great-Grandpa knows about all of this?" Evan pulled out the pocket watch, its damaged hands still moving in their broken rhythm. "I think he knows that his sacrifice mattered, that the children he saved grew up to save others, that his grandson, well, that I tried to follow his example." "You didn't just try," Laura said firmly. "You succeeded." As they walked toward the guest house through the garden of lights, left by grateful strangers, Evan thought about time and legacy, about fathers and grandfathers, about the weight of heroism and the price of sacrifice. His shoulder still ached, would probably always ache, but it was a good pain, a reminder that he'd been in the right place at the right time and had made the right choice. Inside the house, they found more packages, more letters, more tributes to a factory worker who'd died 30 years ago, and the janitor who'd carried on his legacy without knowing it. Evan would read them all, eventually would respond to as many as he could, would try to be worthy of the admiration he hadn't sought. But first he tucked Mia into bed, this brave little girl who'd handled fame and danger with more grace than most adults could manage. "Are you happy, Dad?" she asked as he kissed her forehead. "With how everything turned out?" It was such a simple question with such a complex answer. Was he happy to have been shot? No. Happy to have lost his privacy, his simple life, his anonymity? Not really. But happy to have saved Ethan, to have discovered his grandfather's story, to have found purpose in what had seemed like random violence. "I'm grateful," he said finally. "Sometimes that's better than happy." "I love you, Dad, and I'm proud of you, and Great-Grandpa would be proud too." "I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the candles and letters and thank yous in the world." He left her door slightly open, the way she liked it, and walked to the living room where Laura and Ethan were still reviewing the flood of responses to the day's events. The Samuel Cole Foundation website had crashed from traffic. The Safe Haven Initiative had received endorsements from major corporations. The mayor had announced a Samuel Cole Day would be added to the city calendar. "It's too much," Evan said, sinking into a chair. "It's exactly enough," Laura countered. "Your grandfather's story was forgotten for 30 years. Now it never will be again. Children will learn about him in schools. His name will be on buildings, scholarships, safety programs. The Cole legacy is secure." "I never wanted a legacy. I just wanted to raise my daughter and live quietly." "And my parents just wanted to run a restaurant," Laura said. "Life had other plans. It usually does." Ethan looked up from his tablet. "Mr. Cole, I've created a digital archive of every story, every response, every tribute to your grandfather and you. It will be preserved indefinitely, accessible to future generations studying altruistic behavior and heroic intervention." "Thanks, Ethan, I think." "You're welcome. Also, I've calculated that based on current trending patterns, your story will remain in the news cycle for approximately 6 more days before something else captures public attention." "Thank God," Evan muttered. "However," Ethan continued, "the long-term impact will persist. The foundation, the safety programs, the changed lives, those will continue indefinitely." "No pressure," Evan said dryly. Laura laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd heard from her since the shooting. "Welcome to the burden of making a difference, Mr. Cole. It's heavy, but it's worth carrying." As the evening deepened into night, the candles outside slowly extinguished, the tribute bearers returning to their homes with their own stories of witnessing something meaningful. Evan stood at the window, watching the last lights fade, the pocket watch ticking its broken time in his hand. Somewhere in the city, the 43 were telling their children bedtime stories about the man who'd saved them. Somewhere else, people inspired by the Cole story were signing up to become first responders. And somewhere in a federal prison,
Marcus Webb was perhaps contemplating how his act of intended evil had instead revealed the depth of human goodness. The watch ticked on its damaged mechanism, refusing to quit just as the coalmen had refused to walk away from danger. Time was precious, the inscription read. Waste none of it. Evan hadn't wasted it. Neither had his grandfather. They'd spent their time invested it in the most valuable currency of all other people's lives. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new responsibilities. But tonight, in a house he didn't own wearing clothes that weren't really his, surrounded by a fame he'd never wanted, Evan Cole finally understood who he was. He wasn't just a janitor or just a hero or just a grandfather's legacy fulfilled. He was a link in a chain of human decency that stretched backward and forward through time, each link forged in moments of crisis when ordinary people chose to be extraordinary. The watch ticked on. The night deepened, and somewhere Samuel Cole's spirit rested easy, knowing his sacrifice had echoed through decades to save one more child, to inspire one more act of courage, to prove one more time that heroes didn't wear capes or carry shields. Sometimes they just carried mops and pocket watches, and the unshakable conviction that every life was worth saving. The new streetlights outside the guest house cast long shadows across the manicured lawn as Evan stood on the porch, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion that pulled at every muscle. It had been 2 weeks since the press conference, and the world had indeed moved on to other stories just as Ethan had predicted. But the changes in their lives remained settling into permanence like sediment after a flood. Mia had started at her new school a private academy that Laura had insisted on with security protocols that would have seemed paranoid a month ago, but now felt necessary. She'd made friends quickly, her newfound confidence surprising even Evan. The girl who'd once hidden behind her father's leg was now telling her classmates matter-of-factly about her great-grandfather's heroism, wearing her family legacy like armor against the world's uncertainties. Couldn't sleep either, Laura's voice came from behind him. She emerged from the main house's garden path wearing jeans and a simple sweater, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms and influenced markets. "My shoulder aches when the weather changes," Evan said, though that wasn't really why he was awake. "The weather's been stable for 3 days," Laura observed, joining him on the porch. "Then maybe it's about to change." They stood in comfortable silence, a friendship forged in trauma and deepened by shared responsibility. The Samuel Cole Foundation had officially launched 3 days ago with Evan as its reluctant figurehead and Laura as its primary benefactor. The Safe Haven Initiative had already trained 200 volunteers in emergency response. The changes were real, tangible, growing. "Ethan calculated the impact again today," Laura said with a mixture of pride and amusement. "According to his models, the foundation will directly save approximately 47 lives in its first year." "Oh, 47, Evan repeated. 4 more than my grandfather saved. He's very precise about it. Has spreadsheets and probability matrices and something called a heroism cascade model. That kid's going to change the world someday." "He already has. He just doesn't realize it yet." Laura pulled out her phone, showed him a video. It was Ethan standing in front of his class at the academy, presenting about the statistical value of individual courage. But what struck Evan wasn't the complex mathematics on the board behind him. It was the blue scarf around his neck, the one stained with Evan's blood worn like a talisman. "He won't take it off," Laura said softly. "Says it reminds him that safety isn't guaranteed, that someone chose to make him safe. He's 8 years old. He shouldn't have to think about things like that." "No, he shouldn't. But he does, and he's choosing to make something positive from it, just like Mia is." As if summoned by her name, Mia appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Dad, Ms. Sterling. Why are you awake?" "Just talking, sweetheart. You should be in bed." "I had the dream again," she said quietly. "The one where great-grandpa and you are standing together, and there's all this light and children everywhere laughing." Evan opened his arms, and she crawled into his lap, still small enough to curl against him completely. "It's a good dream, though, right?" "Yeah, but it makes me sad when I wake up, because great-grandpa's not really here." "Sure he is, Laura said gently. "Every time someone reads his story and decides to be brave. Every time a child is saved because someone trained with the foundation. Every time your dad puts on that pocket watch and remembers that time is precious. Mia considered this with the seriousness only children could muster for philosophical questions.
Do you think he knew when he ran into that fire that someday his grandson would save someone too? I think, Evan said carefully, he just knew there were children who needed help. The rest of it, the ripples, the echoes, the connections that all came later. Like throwing a stone in a pond, Mia said. We did that experiment in science class. One action, infinite reactions. When did you get so smart? Evan asked, kissing the top of her head. I've always been smart. You just got famous, so now people notice. Laura laughed, a genuine sound that had become more common in recent days. The weight of nearly losing Ethan was lifting, replaced by something Evan recognized as purpose. Not the purpose of building companies or generating wealth, but of mattering in ways that couldn't be calculated in quarterly reports. There's something I need to tell you, Laura said suddenly. Both of you. I've been waiting for the right time, but there never seems to be one.
Evan felt Mia tense against him, the child's instinct for adult seriousness kicking in. I've been in contact with Jessica, Laura continued, and Evan's world tilted slightly. Your ex-wife, Mia's mother. She called you. Evan's voice was sharper than intended. No, I called her, after she tried to insert herself into the media narrative. Laura held up a hand before Evan could protest. I didn't threaten her this time. I listened, and I learned something interesting. I don't want to hear about Jessica's... She's sick, Evan. Terminal, pancreatic cancer stage 4. She has maybe 6 months. The porch seemed to contract around them. Mia's hand found Evan's and squeezed hard. She wanted to see Mia before the end, but she was too proud to ask directly. The media attention was her clumsy way of trying to reconnect. She left us, Evan said flatly. She made her choice. She made a mistake, Laura corrected. A terrible selfish mistake that she's regretted every day since. I'm not defending her. God knows I wanted to destroy her when she first surfaced. But I'm a mother too, and the thought of dying without saying goodbye to Ethan... She trailed off, unable to finish. Does she really want to see me? Mia asked in a small voice. Yeah, baby girl, she does. Do I have to? No, Evan said firmly. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. But I might want to, Mia continued. Maybe. To ask her why. To tell her about great-grandpa. To see if I look like her. You look like yourself, Evan said, but he knew what she meant. The questions that children of absent parents carried like stones in their pockets, heavy and unchangeable. She's in hospice in Connecticut, Laura said. Private facility, good care. If you decide to go, I can arrange it. If you don't, I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again. They sat with this new weight as the night deepened around them. It seemed unfair, Evan thought, that just as they were finding their footing in this new life, the past would resurface with its own demands. But then again, wasn't that what the past always did? Samuel Cole's past had erupted into their present. Now Jessica's past choices were demanding their own reckoning. I'll think about it, Mia said, finally, sounding far older than her 8 years. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to sit here with you and Ms. Sterling and watch the lights. So they did, 3 people bound by circumstances they'd never asked for, watching the new streetlights that had been installed after the foundation designated this area a safe haven zone. The lights were brighter than standard, with emergency call buttons at their bases, part of the expanding network of protection inspired by one man's refusal to let children die. Mr. Cole? Ethan's voice came from the garden. He approached in pajamas and slippers, tablet clutched as always. I apologize for interrupting, but something significant is happening. Laura sighed. Ethan, it's midnight. Whatever it is can wait until Marcus Webb is dead. The words landed like physical blows. Evan instinctively pulled Mia closer, as if Webb could somehow still reach them from beyond death. How? Laura demanded. Suicide. In his cell. About an hour ago. It's not public yet, but I have monitoring algorithms on anything related to our situation. Ethan adjusted his glasses, a nervous tell he'd developed. He left a note. What did it say? Evan asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Ethan pulled up an image on his tablet, a photograph of a handwritten note. I wanted to hurt her like she hurt me. Instead, I created a hero and revealed a legend. I became the villain in a story about goodness. There's no coming back from that. To the Cole family, I'm sorry. Your grandfather saved my grandmother. You saved the boy. I destroyed myself. The circle closes here.
His grandmother was one of the 43, Laura breathed. My God, his own grandmother was saved by Samuel. Eleanor Webb, Ethan confirmed. She was 7, one of the last ones out. Her daughter grew up to have Marcus. He knew at the end. He knew what he'd nearly destroyed. Evan felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a loosening of the anger he'd carried. Marcus Webb had been a man consumed by rage who'd let that rage drive him to an unforgivable act. But in his final moments, he'd understood the true weight of what he'd done, attempted to murder a child whose very existence was owed to the same man who'd saved his grandmother. The media will go crazy with this, Laura said practically. We need to prepare a statement. No, Evan said firmly. We say nothing. Let him have privacy and death that he didn't allow us in life. His mother doesn't need more pain. Dad's right, Mia said unexpectedly.
Great-grandpa wouldn't want us to be mean about it. He saved Mr. Webb's grandmother. That has to count for something. Eleanor Webb. Evan remembered her frail hands, her tears, her gratitude mixed with shame. Tomorrow he would call her, offer condolences, see if there was anything she needed. It's what Samuel would have done, extended grace even to those who'd harmed him. I should check the security protocols. Harrison's voice came from the shadows. None of them had heard him approach, but then they never did. With Webb gone, his associates might scatter or might seek their own revenge. They won't, Ethan said with surprising confidence. I've been monitoring their communications. They're frightened. Webb's suicide note is being interpreted as an admission of wrongness. They're dissolving their networks, going dark. You've been monitoring terrorist communications, Laura asked sharply. Ethan Sterling, we've discussed appropriate use of technology. It's defensive monitoring only, Ethan protested, to protect Mr. Cole and Mia, and you, always you, Mother. The fierce protectiveness in the boy's voice reminded Evan that for all his brilliance, Ethan was still a child who'd watched someone try to kill him, who'd been saved by a stranger's sacrifice, who wore a blood-stained scarf because it made him feel safe. Thank you, Ethan, Evan said, for watching out for us. Ethan flushed, pleased. It's statistically optimal for group survival. Also, Mia is my friend. Mia perked up. Obviously, we share traumatic bonding educational environments, and you're the only person my age who doesn't treat me like I'm weird. You are weird, Mia said. But weird is good. Normal is boring. Children philosophizing at midnight, Laura said with fond exasperation. This is what my life has become. Better than board meetings, Evan suggested. Infinitely better. They migrated inside as the night grew cooler, settling in the living room of the guest house that had become more home to Evan and Mia than their apartment ever was. The space had been transformed over the past 2 weeks. Mia's drawings on the refrigerator, Evan's work materials for the foundation scattered on tables, photographs from the press conference framed on the mantel. Tell us about the new safety protocols, Mia asked Ethan, knowing it was his favorite topic. As the boy launched into an enthusiastic explanation of response times and coverage areas, Evan found himself thinking about circles the word Webb had used in his final note. Circles closing, opening, overlapping. Samuel's circle of salvation that had included Webb's grandmother. The circle of violence Webb had tried to create. The circle of protection now growing from the Foundation's work. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Unknown numbers rarely brought good news lately, but something made him look. Mr. Cole, this is James Chen. You don't know me, but my father is Dr. James Chen, one of the 43. I'm a teacher in Brooklyn, and today one of my students asked me about heroes. I told him about your grandfather, about you, about how heroism isn't a superpower, but a choice. That student, a kid everyone had written off as troubled, stayed after class to ask how he could train to help others. He wants to join the Safe Haven program. I thought you should know that your story is changing lives you'll never meet. Thank you. Evan read it twice, then passed the phone to Laura, who smiled as she read. "This is why it matters," she said. "Not the headlines or the fame, but this. One troubled kid deciding to be better because of your example." Samuel's example, Evan corrected. Both. The grandfather who ran into fire and the grandson who stepped in front of a bullet. 2 generations proving that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. 3 generations, Mia said firmly. I'm going to help people too. I don't know how yet, but I will. You already do, Ethan said. You helped me understand that friendship isn't about statistical compatibility, but about emotional resonance. I have no idea what that means, but thanks. They talked until nearly dawn, the children eventually falling asleep on the couch. Ethan's tablet finally dark, Mia's head on his shoulder in a display of trust that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. Laura covered them with a blanket, her movements maternal and tender. They're going to be okay, she said quietly. Both of them. Despite everything, or maybe because of it, they're going to be okay. All of them, Evan corrected, thinking of the ripples spreading outward. All the kids touched by this. The ones who'll be saved by the foundation, the ones inspired by the story, the ones who'll grow up in a world where the Safe Haven Network exists. Your grandfather would be proud. I hope so. Evan pulled out the pocket watch, its damaged hands marking their own version of time. I really hope so. As the first light of dawn painted the sky, Evan made a decision. We'll go see Jessica, he said. Not for her, but for Mia, so she doesn't carry questions her whole life. I can arrange it for this afternoon if you'd like. Private, secure, controlled. You've already made arrangements, haven't you? I'm a CEO. I prepare for all contingencies. Laura stood straightening her clothes. I should get Ethan to his actual bed. But Evan, thank you. For what? For saving my son. For honoring your grandfather. For letting us into your life. For showing me that there are things more valuable than stock prices and market shares. You already knew that. I knew it intellectually. You made me feel it. There's a difference. After she carried Ethan out, the boy barely stirring his hand, still clutching the blue scarf, Evan sat with his sleeping daughter, watching the sun rise over this new life they'd built from the ashes of violence. In a few hours, they would drive to Connecticut, would face Jessica, and whatever emotions that encounter would unleash. Tomorrow, there would be foundation meetings, safety training sessions, more lives to touch and save. But right now, in this moment, there was peace. The piece of purpose fulfilled of circles closing and opening of a legacy that had waited 30 years to resurface and now would ripple forward for generations. The pocket watch ticked on its broken mechanism, refusing to quit measuring moments that mattered more than minutes. Somewhere, Samuel Cole's spirit rested, knowing his sacrifice had echoed through time to save not just 43 children, but hundreds, thousands, an infinite cascade of lives preserved and inspired. The streetlights outside dimmed as the sun took over their work, but the emergency buttons at their bases remained ready, waiting for someone in need to press them to call for help that would come, because Evan Cole and his daughter had survived an attack and chosen to transform their trauma into protection for others. Mia stirred, opening her eyes to find her father watching over her as he always did, as he always would. Morning, Dad. Is it time? Time for what, baby girl? Time to go see Mom. To close that circle, too. Sometimes Evan thought children understood things that adults made too complicated. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't jumping in front of a bullet, but facing the person who'd hurt you and choosing to say goodbye with grace. Yeah, he said, helping her sit up. It's time. They drove to Connecticut in Laura's car, Harrison following at a discreet distance, the autumn foliage painting the world in shades of gold and amber. Mia held Evan's hand the entire way, her small fingers intertwined with his drawing strength from his presence, as she always had. The hospice was a converted mansion, all weathered brick and climbing ivy, the kind of place where people with money went to die with dignity. Jessica's room was on the second floor, overlooking a garden where late roses still bloomed despite the approaching cold. She was smaller than Evan remembered cancer having carved away everything unnecessary, leaving only the essential architecture of who she'd been. Her eyes, though Mia's eyes, were still sharp, still carrying that mixture of intelligence and discontent that had first attracted and ultimately repelled him. "Hello, Evan," she said, her voice papery but steady. "Hello, Mia." "Hi," Mia said simply, neither Mom nor Jessica, just an acknowledgement of presence. "You look—" Jessica started, then stopped, perhaps realizing she had no right to comment on how her daughter looked after 5 years of absence. "I look like Dad," Mia said firmly. "But I have your eyes." "Yes, you do. The best part of me passed on to you." They sat in awkward formation, Evan and Mia on one side, Jessica propped up in her hospital bed on the other, the gulf of years between them. "I saw the news," Jessica said finally. "About what happened. About your grandfather Evan. I never knew." "Neither did I." "But you knew who you were. A man who saves children. I always knew that about you, even when I was too selfish to appreciate it." She looked at Mia. "Your father is a hero. I hope you know that." "I've always known that," Mia said. "He didn't need to get shot to prove it." Jessica smiled, a ghost of the expression that had once captivated Evan. "You're stronger than I ever was. Braver, too." "Why did you leave?" Mia asked the question that had haunted her nights for 5 years. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was weak. Because I was scared. Because being a mother meant putting someone else first, and I'd never learned how to do that. I thought I was suffocating, but really I was just selfish." "Did you ever love us?" "I loved you both. I just loved myself more. It's the worst kind of love, the kind that destroys everything it touches." Mia considered this with that serious expression she'd inherited from both parents. "Are you sorry? Every day, every hour, every breath I have left." Tears ran down Jessica's sunken cheeks. "I know it doesn't change anything. I know sorry doesn't undo 5 years of absence, but yes, I'm sorry." Mia looked at Evan, seeking guidance. He nodded slightly, trusting her to know what she needed. "I forgive you," Mia said simply. "Not because you deserve it, but because Dad taught me that holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot coal. It only burns you." Jessica sobbed, then the sound raw and broken. Mia stood, walked to the bed, and took her mother's skeletal hand. "I'm going to tell you about our life," she said. "About our apartment and my school, and Ethan and Miss Sterling. About great-grandpa and the 43 children and the foundation. I'm going to tell you all of it so you know who I am. And then we're going to say goodbye properly." For the next hour, Mia talked. She told Jessica about every important moment of the last 5 years, about friends and teachers, and the neighbor's cat she fed secretly. She told her about the night at the movie theater, about the hospital, about the press conference. She told her about the pocket watch and the blue scarf, and the candles people had left. Jessica listened, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face, memorizing every expression, every gesture, every indication of the person Mia had become without her. When the stories were done, when the gaps had been filled, Mia leaned forward and kissed her mother's forehead. "Goodbye, Mom," she said. "I hope you find peace." "I already have," Jessica whispered. "Seeing who you've become, knowing you're loved and safe, that's all the peace I need." They left as the sun was setting, neither of them looking back. In the car, Mia was quiet for a long time. "Are you okay?" Evan asked finally. "I think so. I'm sad, but not the bad kind of sad. The kind where you know something needed to happen, even if it hurt." "You were incredibly brave in there. I learned from you, and from great-grandpa, even though I never met him. Bravery runs in our family." "So does love," Evan said, pulling her close as Harrison drove them home. "So does love," she agreed. When they arrived back at the estate, they found Laura and Ethan had prepared dinner, a simple pasta that filled the guest house with the smell of garlic and herbs. They ate together, the four of them, a makeshift family forged by trauma, but sustained by choice. The foundation received a major donation today, Laura mentioned casually, anonymous but substantial, $10 million. "That's enough to fund operations for 2 years, Ethan calculated instantly. "Who would donate that much anonymously?" Evan asked. Laura smiled mysteriously. "Someone who understands that heroes shouldn't have to worry about money while they're saving the world." "Laura, you didn't—" "The donation is anonymous,"
she repeated firmly. But whoever made it wanted me to tell you that Samuel Cole's sacrifice created ripples that are still spreading, that every life saved creates the potential for more lives to be saved, that heroism isn't a single act but a continuous choice. The pocket watch ticked in Evan's pocket, its broken hands marking time that wasn't quite right but was absolutely perfect. Outside, the streetlights came on their bright beams, pushing back the darkness, their emergency buttons ready for anyone who needed help. "Dad," Mia said suddenly, "I want to make paper cranes." "Paper cranes, Prasam?" "Origami. Miss Yamamoto taught us in art class. In Japan, they believe if you fold 1,000 paper cranes, your wish comes true. I want to make them for the foundation, for all the kids who need protecting." "That's a lot of cranes, sweetheart." "I've got time. We've got time." So as the evening deepened, Mia taught them all to fold paper cranes. Even Ethan put down his tablet to learn his precise fingers creating perfect birds while discussing the mathematics of paper folding. They made them from whatever paper they could find. Newspapers with their headlines about heroes, colorful origami paper Laura had Harrison fetch, even pages from Evan's notebook where he'd been writing down memories of his grandfather. As they folded, they talked about the future, the Foundation's expansion plans, the Safe Haven network that would eventually cover the entire city, the scholarship program being established in Samuel's name, the memorial being planned at the site of the old Riverside factory. "It's beautiful," Laura said, looking at the growing flock of paper birds. "All of it, from tragedy to this." "Great-grandpa would have liked it," Mia said confidently. Birds that could fly, made by hands that chose to create instead of destroy. By the time they stopped exhausted and paper cut, they'd made nearly 200 cranes. Mia strung them on thread, hanging them in the windows where they'd catch the morning light. 800 more to go, she announced. "But we'll get there. Together." Together. The word resonated in the room, a promise and a truth. They were together, this unlikely family, these survivors of violence who'd chosen to transform their pain into purpose. As Evan tucked Mia into bed that night, she pulled out a paper crane she'd kept separate from the others. It was made from a page of newspaper, the part with his picture from the hospital. "This one's special," she said. "It's for Great-Grandpa, so he knows we remember." Evan took the crane, carefully feeling its delicate weight. "We'll always remember. And we'll always help people, even when it's scary, even when it hurts, because that's what we do." "That's what we do," Evan agreed, kissing her forehead. He left the crane on her nightstand where the moonlight through the window made it glow softly. Walking to his own room, Evan pulled out the pocket watch one more time. Its hands moved in their broken circle, never quite keeping proper time, but never stopping either. Tomorrow there would be meetings and plans, and the continuous work of building something meaningful from the foundation of sacrifice. Tomorrow Jessica would still be dying, and Marcus Webb would still be dead, and the world would still need heroes. But tonight there were paper cranes in the windows and children sleeping safely in their beds. Tonight, the streetlights stood sentinel, and the emergency buttons waited ready. Tonight, the ripples of Samuel Cole's sacrifice continued to spread, touching lives that would never know his name but would benefit from his courage. The watch ticked on, and Evan finally understood its broken rhythm. It wasn't measuring time as the world understood it, minutes and hours and days. It was measuring something else, something more precious. It was measuring moments of grace, acts of courage, the infinite distance between who we are and who we choose to become. "Time is precious," the inscription read. "Waste none of it." They hadn't wasted it. Not Samuel running into that fire. Not Evan jumping in front of that bullet. Not Mia forgiving a mother who didn't deserve it. Not any of the 43 living lives that honored their salvation. The legacy lived on not in monuments or headlines, but in the quiet determination to make the world safer, one saved child at a time. It lived in paper cranes and emergency buttons and training programs and scholarship funds, in the simple promise that when someone cried for help, someone else would answer. "You're safe, kid." The words echoed through time from grandfather to grandson, from one generation to the next, a promise that heroes were real, that courage was contagious, that every life saved created the potential for more lives to be saved. The circle hadn't closed.
It had become infinite, rippling outward in waves that would never stop spreading, carried forward by everyone who heard the story and chose to be better, to be braver, to be the person who runs toward danger instead of away. Outside, one of the new streetlights flickered and then steadied its beam, cutting through darkness like hope itself. Somewhere in the city, a child was walking home safely because that light existed. Somewhere else, a volunteer was training to be a first responder because the Cole story had inspired them. And in the guest house of an estate in Westchester, a man with a bullet scar and a broken pocket watch finally fell asleep, knowing that his grandfather's sacrifice had not been in vain, that his own sacrifice had meaning, that his daughter would carry forward a legacy of courage that time could never erase. The watch ticked on through the night, its damaged hands moving in their eternal broken circle, measuring not time, but love, not minutes, but meaning, not the passage of days, but the accumulation of lives saved, protected, and inspired. The legacy lived on,